Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, and I am Amy Rose here, and we are back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. In some cases, I hate this game so much, for the Nintendo Wii U, and only for the Wii U. So, last time, we essentially did manage to transport it into the forms of one of those sub-levels, which appears to be River Rush, to able to actually make our way to the next destination, which appears to be the pits. So today for this video, is that speaking of the forms of the pits, I think, suffice to say, after this particular Mark Speed section right here, I believe we're about to be hit on to straight into the forms of the next location, which appears to be the pits. And as a result, Sonic, we can able to actually expect to get the next Chaos Crystal, which means this is going to be the third Chaos Crystal we can able to actually obtain. So, yeah, exactly, Amy. So because of that though, yeah, nothing right to harm about when it comes to the forms of the Mark Speed sections as a result, despite the fact that, you know, as I said before, the frame rate really chokes for the most part, especially concerning for the fact that, again, because of how the fact that this game runs on CryEngine 3, so as a result, it will able to expect able to run this steady, but as a result, it doesn't. So because of that though, thankfully though, those Mark Speed sections aren't too much noticeable. When it comes to the forms of difficulty, they are self-explanatory, and thankfully though, unlike in Sonic 06 though, that basically though, you don't die automatically if you get smacked into something. So anyway, a few things we want to talk about is about the fact that, well, today's date of course is the 10th of June today, in some cases in 2024 today, and my goodness, enjoying the forms within the past few days, after the events of the Summer Game Fest, which already did happen, since in 3 days ago, I'm gonna say, I was very excited about the forms of some aspects. Like, for instance, we got ourselves some more gameplay footage of the forms of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, and not only that, also during around that time and during the forms within the past few days ago, we actually got ourselves our first glimpse of the forms of not one, but 2 animated movies. So one of them is actually in production right now, and then the other one is going to be on its way until specifically by the end of this year in 2024. So relatively speaking, that was about the fact that I will talk more about that if we get onto the actual level itself. So either way though, and there's also another thing it's worth noting for, is that we also did manage to able to receive not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 brand new games have been added for specifically the Game Boy Nintendo Switch online subscription services. So because of that though, and they're all entirely related to Mega Man games. So yeah, again, we'll talk more about that in a second, because relatively speaking though, after collecting some little amount of rings around here, and suffice to say though is about the fact that we finally made our way to the pit, so now we can able to actually do a lot of exploration.
What is all this stuff?
Tails and I will go left, up along the ridge.
You really think you can keep up with me?
Been doing it all day.
Well, if you can't keep up, just go with them.
One of these days, I am gonna knock you out. Really.
So from now on, we're about to able to take control of not only with Sonic, but as well as Knuckles as well. So because of that though, and yes, for those of you probably wondering, this is going to be the longest video we've ever done for the sake of the forms of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric so far. Clearly because no matter what though, we're only going to be showing off with the forms of 1 level per video, just in case it'll make things a little bit more sense, for the sake of the forms of how the fact that we don't want to make the actual playthrough sometimes feels a bit dragged on, so that's besides the point. So, anyway though, so there's also another thing we want to point out as well. We actually got ourselves our brand new trailer for the sake of the forms of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero recently. Not only does it show us the forms of some brand new gameplay footage, but also we got ourselves our release date for that game. And I'm almost assuming about the fact that it's going to be releasing at some point in next year for 2025 to mark the 20th anniversary of the actual game's release of Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 1 for the PlayStation 2. Well, actually as it turns out, it's going to be releasing in this year, specifically the 11th of October. So yeah, that's actually very surprising actually, and unfortunately though is about the fact I don't think it's possible we can able to get the game on day 1 sadly, clearly because of 2 reasons. For one, we are still about to be saving up to able to pre-order Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, probably at some point until September sometime, but it's also about the fact that we still have no luck to trying to able to actually obtain Xbox Series X as well as PlayStation 5, because suffice to say, those two systems are pretty much exclusives. So because of that though, maybe we'll find out more details about the forms of the Switch successor, probably at some point in during the forms of later on in the year, or perhaps even maybe during at some point in next year. We're not exactly 100% sure, but I digress. So, anyway, speaking of the forms of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations actually, that I've noticed is about the fact that they did show us a brand new trailer for the game. Not only does it show us some more gameplay footage, specifically Shadow Generations portion of the game, because mind you about the fact that when it comes to Sonic Generations, as far as the upcoming remaster as far as I'm concerned, it basically plays exactly like the forms of how it does it since back in 2011. Mind you about the fact that when it comes to that particular trailer itself, it did say on the forms of the actual bottom text saying that it was captured on PC, so as a result, no matter what though, is about the fact that I'm still really looking forward to able to be replaying through Sonic Generations for not only for the third time, but not only for a fourth time, but the fifth time, because obviously I always attempt to really enjoy Sonic Generations a lot, especially concerning with all its fan services, especially concerning for the fact that it's so nice to see older levels has been remade from the ground up. So yeah, that seems pretty cool. And on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact that when it comes to the forms of the Shadow Generations new gameplay footage has been shown off, not only does it show us the forms of this very strange transformation for Shadow, but it's also about the fact that not one, but two brand new levels has been brought back. Like one of them based off from Sonic Heroes, and then the other one is actually based off from Sonic 06. And what levels I was referring to? Well, for Sonic Heroes, they somehow brought back Rail Canyon / Bullet Station from Sonic Heroes, which I think is actually a pretty cool choice in my opinion. And then as far as Sonic 06 is as far as I'm concerned, or Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 I should say, they somehow brought back Kingdom Valley from Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, which I'm almost assuming about the fact that they're trying to bring back, let's just say, Dusty Desert, but apparently though, they somehow choose Kingdom Valley, which, as a result, I really do enjoy Kingdom Valley, despite the fact that that particular level is actually ridiculously challenging and difficult at the same time, clearly because of how affected with the level's length, and on top of that, you know, frustrating sections, specifically when it comes to Shadow Story, because of the forms of this very bad camera angles while trying to dodge a lot of those crumbling towers, and you probably get the idea about that, especially concerning for the fact that obviously Maxi has already mentioned about this before, since in this entire playthrough of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, since in about a couple of months ago, so... But anyway, and as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that the release date has also been confirmed, which, if I recall correctly, is going to be coming until also in October, except the fact that it's going to be coming out at some point in October 25th. So, if I recall correctly as well, it's going to be taking place on Friday as opposed to Tuesday this time around. Because normally, in the past few years, since Sonic Forces or something like that, that basically though certain Sonic games always attempt to be releasing during at some point on Tuesdays sometimes, because the last time they did this was back in during the forms of in last year for the likes of Sonic Superstars, which again did came out in exactly the same week as the forms of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, despite the fact that Sonic Superstars sadly did not sell very well, clearly because of the forms of how the fact that obviously, as I said earlier, that game did came out in the exact same week as Super Mario Bros. Wonder, because both of those games are entirely in 2D, so yeah, I can expect that. So, anyway, in terms of the forms of how the fact that when it comes to Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, as far as pre-order bonuses as far as I'm concerned, well, basically, it did manage to able to reveal not one, but two items you get if you managed able to pre-order the game for the likes of the forms of the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4/PlayStation 5, and even Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, mind you. Basically though, it's about the fact that you get yourselves one of those cosmetic skins, and then the other one was actually a pretty cool thing you get, and that's what appears to be by the forms of Gerald Robotnik's journal detailing Shadow's creation. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And meanwhile, on the subject when it comes to cosmetic character skins, that it looks like, out of nowhere, we're about to be receiving the Sonic Adventure Legacy skin, which I will say, that is actually pretty awesome in my eyes, especially concerning for the fact that, well, maybe potentially speaking of, once we do manage able to pre-order the game, likely also for the sake of the forms of once again 3 versions as opposed to 4 versions, because as I said before, we are still out of luck when it comes to obtaining the PlayStation 5 at this rate, especially concerning for the fact that it's kind of unfortunate that we will definitely miss out on playing Dragon Ball Sparking Zero for the time being. So, oh well, no big deal. So anyway, before we get into more details about this though, here's the forms of technically yet another boss fight. So basically though, it's about the fact that we need to deal with these more exactly the same robots as before, except the fact that once we do manage able to deal with this particular part right there, then obviously though we can now able to actually use the inner beam, so that way we can able to actually drag this particular robot out, and suffice to say, it looks like a crab of any sort. Yeah, I was thinking about this, especially because of this look and all that stuff. But basically in this entire boss fight, as far as I'm concerned, that basically though we need to able to use the inner beam to able to actually just to grab certain enemies and then toss the enemies right back at this crab machine right here, or specifically the crab robot. And the more you're trying to do it, then obviously though something tells me about the fact that we can able to progress onwards. So yeah, but then again though, Amy, is about the fact that the majority of the boss fights in this game are a total joke, so there's nothing else to it for the sake of the challenge, but that's besides the point. So anyway,
We did it!
Who brought the thunder? This guy? You said we. I heard it!
Nah, you have too much dirt in your ears.
But you did say it. I'm proud of you. That's what a good teammate would say.
so suffice to say, after we're done with this particular boss fight, basically we can now able to go into this hall, and basically we can now able to continue our progressioning in the pit. So anyways, let's continue with our discussion about the forms of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations for a bit. As I said before, it's about the fact that when it comes to the Sonic Adventure Legacy skin, I think that could be a perfect opportunity for me anyway, that as soon as I get into the forms of some stages based off from the Dreamcast era, to be more specifically with the forms of Speed Highway, for instance, basically I can able to actually change my cosmetic character to modern Sonic that we all know and love, to the Dreamcast model of Sonic. So that would be a perfect opportunity, especially concerning for the fact that, well, you're also able to find out more about it if we decided able to do our entire Let's Play of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations during at some point in the future. So either way though, yeah. And on top of all that stuff though, there's also once again the Digital Deluxe Edition, which is basically self-explanatory, that basically it did show us the forms of some additional items you do get if you managed able to pre-order the game as an additional Deluxe Edition. But before we get into more details about this though, that it looks like about the fact that when it comes to those 2 films I was on about earlier, that basically one of those films is actually currently in production right now, which appears to be the 3rd movie of the Angry Birds movie series. So as a result, we're about to be receiving the Angry Birds movie 3. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting to say the least. But then again, we'll find out more about that if we get on to later years to come, because as far as I'm aware, it did show us a teaser for the actual film, but either way though, that's what I can really think about that. So anyways, let's get out of this particular cavern right here, and we do need to able to find that particular crack on the wall, so just to ensure for the fact that we can able to actually get out of this darkness section right here. But I also do realize about the fact that there's also another crown right up there, and I do get the feeling about the fact that, oh, is it possible I can get up there? Oh, I can. Okay, it doesn't really matter what characters you're going to be using on that part, but either way. So let's just go ahead and continue spin dashing for a little bit. So yeah, and suffice to say we made our way to this bit right there.
If you can't solve a problem,
So I guess it's now Knuckles' time to shine, to able to actually crack this particular thing here.
Usually is.
So that way we can able to continue once we able to, well, press the Y button basically. So yeah, I don't think it's possible that Sonic can do that. So Anyways, let's do a charge punch there. Or just do button mashing. And now, everyone, the scene you've all been waiting for.
Big deal. Maybe I loosened it.
Yeah, you keep thinking that.
Whoa, help!
Okay, that part is funny.
I've got you.
I can't hold on much longer.
This is not how it ends for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, Amy, that scene is kind of funny, especially that was the only best part about the game for me anyway, because I love the fact that every time when Knuckles hits Sonic, then Sonic loses his ring, so yeah, it makes sense for the actual context if Sonic gets hit by something, so ranging from enemies to spikes, hazards, you name the rest, so that's actually a pretty funny scene, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, now we've managed able to get onto this next part of the pit, so yeah, this is gonna be quite of a lengthy level as it is. Especially considering about the fact that we need to do a lot of combat, as well as puzzle solving, and you name the rest. So, anyways, back into what I was saying about the forms of the Digital Deluxe Edition when it comes to Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, is that, well, suffice to say, they also did manage to bring in some interesting stuff here and there, in between both the Japanese version as well as the English version. Like, for instance, in the English version of the Digital Deluxe Edition for Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, they did show us the forms of some interesting items you were able to receive for that particular purchase, ranging from additional level and skin for Shadow, and it did say on the brackets saying, releasing Holiday 2024, and meanwhile we're able to actually receive skill points, and extra background music pack, and digital art book plus OST, and finally Terio's skin, which appears to be like the original concept art, or specifically the original concept design for the sake of Shadow as far as this is concerned. So yeah, this is actually quite interesting, especially about the fact that, well, it did the exactly the same thing back in during the forms of been last year since Sonic Superstars, where basically they did somehow show us the forms of that particular Digital Deluxe Edition for Sonic Superstars. Like, one of those includes with the forms of the Rabbit skin, for specifically for Sonic anyway. So yeah, despite the fact that it was all cosmetic, so either way though, yeah, that seems quite interesting. So, and another thing is worth noting for they also did mention about is that, well, as far as I'm aware, it also did say, until specifically on October 22nd, which appears to be on Tuesday and stuff like that, it did say play 3 days early. So because of that though, yeah, that's something worth noting for, especially concerning for the fact that if you desperately want able to experience Shadow Generations portion of the game earlier than it was originally attempted, well, by all means, you can able to actually just try to do that if you're trying to able to actually pre-order the game with the Digital Deluxe Edition. So yeah, that's basically all there really is to it. Well, specifically with the English version of the Digital Deluxe Edition as it is. So, meanwhile, in the Japanese version, on the other hand, not only does it show us the forms of a different box art, but it's also about the fact that when it comes to pre-order bonus items, alongside with the Digital Deluxe Edition, items you will receive are entirely different, except for one, because obviously though you can still able to actually receive the Dreamcast model of Sonic for as far as the cosmetic character as it is. So yeah, that seems nothing different from the English version. So suffice to say, while looking at the forms of the actual box art for the Japanese version of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, my goodness, it's actually a lot different compared to the forms of how it does it on the English version. So because of that though, while looking in the journey forms of the English version of the actual box art they somehow revealed for Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, it looks very similar to the forms of how it does it in the original Sonic Generations, except there are some new additions. Like, for instance, with Classic Sonic and Modern Sonic are now placed differently from the actual front cover. Like, for instance, Classic Sonic is on the left, whilst meanwhile for Modern Sonic is now on the right, and meanwhile for Shadow, he's actually in the middle of the box art. So, makes sense about the fact that obviously that was about the fact that Shadow Generations is the main attraction for that particular re-release of the actual Sonic Generations game as it is. So yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And, well, on the subject for that matter though, when it comes to the forms of the background images they somehow shown us with that particular box art in mind, that basically it still shows us with the forms of the Green Hill Zone, but it's also with the forms of the actual red background on the top portion of the actual box art, which I will say though, that does look pretty cool. So, anyway, back into what we were saying about the forms of the Japanese version for a moment, when it comes to Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. So, yeah, suffice to say, is about the fact that when it comes to the pre-ordered bonus items you do get in the Japanese version, as I said before, you're still able to actually receive yourselves the Sonic Adventure cosmetic skin for Modern Sonic. So, you're still able to actually see the forms of not only for its Lightspeed Dash shoes, based off from Sonic Adventure 1, but it's also the Crystal Ring itself as well. And on the subject for this point for that matter, there's also this particular logo has been shown in during the forms of this Japanese trailer, which as a result it appears to be something relates to the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 the movie apparently. So yeah, that's something worth noting for. And on the subject, when it comes to the forms of the Digital Deluxe Edition, you're able to actually get yourselves with this very cool statue of Shadow himself, holding that familiar logo based off from Shadow the Hedgehog as a video game itself. And there's also with the forms of this particular, the art book, for the sake of the art of Shadow Cross or Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. And there's also the keychain featuring the forms of not only a familiar Sonic Speed shoes, or specifically Sonic Shoe, but there's also the Shadow Shoe itself as well. So yeah, it seems kind of cool and everything, all in all. And also, I've noticed something is about the fact that when it comes to the forms of certain changes in regards to the forms of Sonic Generations as far as this is concerned, that I found out there was actually two information. I did somehow manage to discover something when it comes to like changes from the original game. Like, for instance, Classic Sonic now actually has a drop dash since in Sonic Mania, alongside with Sonic Forces, as well as a bunch of Sonic games throughout the most recent releases, ranging from Sonic Origins, as well as the forms of Sonic Superstars. So, yeah, there's no surprise there, but this is actually pretty cool that we can now able to actually utilize with the drop dash as Classic Sonic in Sonic Generations. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell. And there's also the forms of how the fact that there are now a non-specific number of Chao hidden throughout every level in the game. That these Chao also appears in the first cutscene of the game, celebrating Sonic's birthday, despite the fact that the original version of Sonic Generations was meant to be for the 20th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, I was gonna be thinking about that, Sonic, especially concerning for the fact that at this point in time, that until specifically later on in June, that you'll become 33, if I recall correctly, right? Well, yes, Amy, because after all, ever since in last year, that Amy Rose, in some cases yourself, Amy, that you've obviously already became 30 just recently. So because of that though, which also applies with Knuckles as well, since in Journey forms of about a couple of months ago, since in February. So anyway, and back into what I was saying about the forms of the Chaos is now going to be appearing in Journey forms of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, specifically Sonic Generations portion of the game, that the Chao can become a companion of Classic and Modern Sonic in these levels, something very similar to the forms of how it does it in Sonic Advance 3. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting to say the least. So, and also, suffice to say, is about the fact that when it comes to looking upon the forms of the Xbox One, or in some cases Xbox Series X version of the game itself as well, that I've noticed the actual box art with the forms of the game itself, along with the forms of that familiar Xbox logo, just keeps on changing all of a sudden. Like, at one point it did somehow manage to able to show us the Xbox symbol, alongside with the forms of the systems are only compatible with. So suffice to say, it's about the fact that it seems it's now going to be about the fact that it did still shows us the Xbox logo somewhere on the top left corner, but every nowadays is about the fact that the actual text, when it comes to both Xbox One and Xbox Series X, text words on the top right corner of the actual box art. So yeah, it's a very strange transition, as you said, for this point, Sonic. Yeah, I was going to be thinking about that, Amy, especially concerning for the fact that I have no idea what they're up to at this point. So, Anyway, let's get into the films of the next topic at this point, and that's what appears to be about the fact that another one of those films, as I said this before, is going to be releasing until by the end of this year in 2024. And the actual film I was talking about is, yes indeed, the brand new Wallace and Gromit movie. Or to be more accurate though, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Must Fall. So, suffice to say, I was really excited about this. Not only is it going to be releasing on Netflix from everywhere else, but since we're in the UK, that means it's going to be releasing on BBC. So because of that though, I was really excited about that, like I said before. Not only does it show us the forms of a few seconds teaser clips, but also, out of nowhere, it looks like one of those main villains from The Wrong Trousers is back. Specifically, Pfeffer's McCrew. So yeah, I was not expecting that he's going to be making this massive comeback, and it's actually pretty cool about the fact that we can able to actually get a chance to see the brand new Wallace and Gromit film ever since in, well, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit back in 2005. So it's been like almost 20 years ago, or to be more accurate though, 19 years ago as a matter of fact, because generally speaking I was about the fact that, well, obviously back in 2005, that, you know, both DreamWorks and Aardman did somehow manage to work upon Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and, also, if I've noticed something, is about the fact that the actual runtime results in between both the Curse of the Were-Rabbit compared to the films of how it does it for Vengeance Must Fall, it looks like the runtime has been confirmed for Vengeance Must Fall, and it's going to be confirmed it's going to be on 17 minutes as opposed to even longer minutes. So, it's going to be roughly about 15 minutes shorter compared to the films of how it does it for The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, but I don't mind about it too much, concerning for a fact that obviously that was about the fact that, well, do you already know about the fact that back in 2017, that one of those voice actors called Peter Sallis did somehow passed away since in 2017? Oh yeah, that's actually pretty sad, but in the end though, he did a really dang good job when it comes to voicing Wallace himself, so, jeez, Gromit. Well, you almost did the right impression though, Amy, despite the fact that you're a girl after all, so, yeah, at least I did try. So, anyway, continue. So, suffice to say for this point is about the fact that, well, when it comes to the films of the actual film itself, as far as I'm aware, that obviously though is about the fact that Wallace's voice is going to be voiced by, let's just say, Ben Whitehead. So as a result, he did manage to able to did certain voices for Wallace, not just by the forms of certain commercials, but it's also with the actual video games themselves as well. So yeah, that's one thing I want able to classify for this. So either way though, that's as far as we can able to say about this particular topic in mind. So anyways, let's go and activate those little switches right here, so just in case we'll meet up with Tails and Amy.
Finally, what took you guys so long?
Seriously?
Isn't this place awesome? Our minecart ride was so cool. And the views. Oh gosh, yes, forgot about that. I'm pretty sure this place is a dig site for Lyric, but we haven't seen any of his bots. I mean, we almost did, but heard the sirens and off they went before they saw us whip by. Guys, where are we?
Whoa, hang on!
Okay, so it looks like we ended up in the Mark Speed section after all. Yep, while trying to avoid not only with rocks, but as well as the falls of some more obstacles here and there. So, anyways, there's also another thing we want to point out as well, is that during the forms within the Summer Game Fest actually, there's actually the forms of this particular game coming up, which suffice to say is going to be a yet another LEGO game, but this time what appears to be by the forms of LEGO Horizons. Apparently though, not only is it going to be releasing on PlayStation 5, but it's also out of nowhere, it's going to be releasing on PC Steam, alongside with Epic Store, and also for the Nintendo Switch.
The crystal! Finally! An easy one.
Whoa.
say something, didn't you?
Well, it looks like here's the next boss fight right here. So we ended up with not one, but two bosses in one particular location. So, one at the very beginning, and the other one which appears to be taking place by the end of the pit. So, anyways, here's the next boss fight, and this one appears to be known as the Drill Worm. So, in order able to deal with this boss fight right here, despite the fact it's a little bit slightly slower compared to the forms of how it does it on the previous boss fight we've already fight against, that basically does about the fact that you guys know about the forms of this crap robots we've already did manage to taking care of. Well, basically does about the fact that we need to once again utilize with the inner beam to grab certain enemies, except this time around though, if you couldn't tell, as far as what Knuckles did somehow point things out as far as the hint is concerned, basically though, as you can tell, not able to deal the damage when it comes to the forms of the Drill Worm, that basically though is about the fact that we need to throw those enemies right into its mouth, because obviously it does have this little suction function. And basically though is about the fact that if you're trying to hit him more times while trying to toss some more enemies right back at the forms of the Drill Worm, basically though is your chance to able to actually grab the Drill Worm with the inner beam, and then you simply just have to button mash the whole way through to deal with the most devastating damage when it comes to the forms of Drill Worm himself. And every once in a while though is about the fact that they now start able to sending us the forms of those little trampolines of any sort. So basically though, if you're trying to able to aim at the exact right angle, then obviously though it's about the fact that you can able to actually just try to able to deal with the forms of Drill Worm as it is. So, but as I said before, it's about the fact that the majority of the boss fights in this game are a total joke, as far as I said this before. So, anyways, back to what I was saying about the forms of this particular game called Lego Horizon Adventures, I think is what it says anyway, and I kind of believe about the fact that that game is going to be releasing on a Nintendo Switch. So, and suffice to say, in terms of the release date as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be due out at some point in this holiday season for Holiday 2024. So yeah, that's as far as I can try to able to explain about that. And also, out of nowhere as well, it looks like we're about to be receiving this particular new series coming up, specifically until 2025, and that series is actually going to call it Motel Transylvania, where a new series that follows Drag and Nathus as they head to California and try to set up a brand new resort for humans and monsters, and it's going to be releasing on Netflix during at some point, as I said before, until 2025. So yeah, that's quite a lot of releases during the falls of that specific front, mind you. So yeah, I was gonna be thinking about that, especially concerning for the fact that I'm pretty sure about the fact that we've only got about, let's just say, 4 more days to go now until Inside Out 2 is gonna be releasing on a big screen, so. And, relatively speaking though, Amy, we have no idea what the review scores is going to be like for Inside Out 2. I suppose we'll find out more about it probably at some point by the end of this month, which appears to be June itself, before we hit on to July, but that's besides the point. So, there goes the forms of the Drill Worm. Again, pretty self-explanatory, and is also ridiculously easy itself as well. But again, there's a lack of challenge to be found around here. And let's just say, we'll grab the 3rd Chaos Crystal, and we get the heck out of here.
Well, there is good news. Yes, the good news is Sonic still has the map. So all we have to do is draw him out, and I know just how to do it.
By the way, Sonic, I want to ask, what's that? I've noticed about the fact that with that particular Chaos Crystal we did somehow obtain from earlier, right? Yeah, what about it? It feels like the exactly the same shape as like a heart. Well, suffice to say, Amy, it almost feels like a heart when it comes to that particular shape. So, anyway, so now we're done with the forms of the pit, and now we're going back onto that particular hub world. So, suffice to say, I think this is going to be the final time we can able to actually explore into this hub world, because after all, as I said before, we somehow managed able to get ourselves 3 Chaos Crystals for right now, so this means we can now able to actually go into the later progressioning for the sake of this particular game of any sort. So, Anyways, let's go ahead and just do some more spin dashing every once in a while. So now we need to make our way to that particular estimation mark right there. So now we can able to actually see what's the next objective we can able to do for this point. So, and suffice to say, there's also another thing we want to point out as well, is that it looks like for the sake of the forms of how Shadow Generations is actually going to plays out to be, in regards to the forms of this entire structure of the game itself, or specifically with that particular side story in mind, that it feels like about the fact that we're about to be receiving that familiar thing since in Sonic Frontiers. And what do I mean by that? Well, apparently though, when it comes to the forms of Sonic Generations, or specifically Sonic Cross Shadow Generations, that when it comes to Sonic Generations, when it comes to the hub world itself, it's going to remain the same. However, in Shadow Generations, it's going to be a lot different, because as a result, it's going to become the open zone. Something very similar to the forms of how it does it for Sonic Frontiers, which I think is actually pretty cool to me anyway. Especially concerning for the fact that you can able to actually explore into a 3D open zone, so just I'm sure for the fact that you can able to interact with the forms of some aspects. In fact, kind of think about it though, it does also kind of reminds me like the exact same vibes as the forms of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. To be more specifically, Bowser's Fury, because obviously those about the fact that every time whenever I looked upon that particular image of Shadow Generations hub world, that usually for the actual scope and everything, it looks remarkably similar to the forms of how it does it for Bowser's Fury in my opinion, especially concerning for the fact that the only difference is about the fact that when it comes to Sonic Generations as well as Shadow Generations, it's all about with the forms of time and space and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's as far as I can try to say about it. In fact, let us know in the comments down below for the question of the day. Are you guys still excited, able to actually try to get Sonic Cross Shadow Generations? Because I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Because obviously, though, we are still basically excited, able to actually get the game for the sake of the forms of not only for the Switch version, so we can play that game on the go, as well as that, there was also with... What? What's wrong, Sonic? Is that a glitch? Yup, it's a glitch. See? This game is literally impossible to play, and we're not even halfway through it yet! Anyway, I suppose that was our first glitch, or first major glitch, we've somehow encountered in this playthrough so far, which, as a result, as I said before, this game is so unfinished, and because of that though, I do remember back in Journey Forms in 2019, actually, when, oh god. Oh, okay. I did not notice there was actually nothing there, so... Oh, jeez. Because, anyway, back into what I was saying about the fact I remember back in 2019 when Daffy Duck has first experiencing this game. Basically, though, he did somehow encounters not one, but two, or even three, game-breaking glitches, which as a result, it's all about clipping through objects. So because of that though, yeah, it's pretty embarrassing as far as this is concerned. Although, unlike in Sonic 06 though, when it comes to glitches, they are, despite the fact that it's also unpolished as well, but at least it's kind of like so bad it's funny kind of category. Whilst in here though, it's unpleasant to see, especially concerning for the fact that, like I said before, the frame rate chugs whenever you go into a mark speed section, which is also unpleasant enough as it is. So, either way, suffice to say for this point, guys, I think that's as far as we can able to talk about, in terms of the forms of specific discussions, which, as a result, well, we were originally trying to decide to mention about the forms of how the fact that, well, did you guys know about the fact it's been 10 years ago, and why the heck am I floating in the air? That makes no sense to me. So anyways though, did you guys know about the fact it's been 10 years ago since E3 2014 game announcements, which, as a result, we were originally trying to mention about the forms of while looking back on specific games have been revealed since in E3 2014, but let's just say about the fact that we'll probably let Tiana will mention more details on that until when she decides to go back on playing Princess Peach Showtime. So, yeah. And there's also another thing I want to point out as well, is that out of nowhere as well, it looks like we're about to be receiving a brand new remaster of a game that is currently in development. And that game in question is a remaster of Yooka-Laylee. And that in title is going to be called Yokai Replay Lee. So because of that though, it's like a remastered version of the original Yooka-Laylee since in 2017. And if I recall, Sonic, is that I believe the only biggest differences I can probably think about, and that's what appears to be the visual presentation, or specifically, graphics. Yes, exactly, because, well, despite the fact that it doesn't being confirmed the release date just yet though, because as I said before, that particular remaster is going to be in development for right now, so we have no idea when that game is going to be releasing exactly, but I do know it's going to be coming onto Steam, I'm presuming so anyway. So anyway, and there's also another thing is worth noting for, apparently though, is about the fact that when it comes to graphics with that particular topic in mind, that for some reason, I have no idea why people got pretty bored when it comes to likely for the sake of the forms of the realism for the graphics presentation when it comes to future games alike. Like, I do know for certain about the fact that one of those games in particular called Corn Card, that particular game is basically like a first-person shooter kind of game, where basically though is about the fact that apparently though, from what I've heard anyway, there's a lot of dislikes aspect ratio, whilst compared to the forms of how it does it for Astro Bot, that it did somehow has a lot of likes for that particular game in mind. I'm guessing it's probably because a lot of people seem to get a lot of bored for the likes of the forms of the realistic graphics this time around though, when it comes to the forms of certain games, as far as I'm assuming so anyway. Well, mind you, Amy, is about the fact it has been about quite a few days ago since we've last played this game for sure, especially concerning for the fact that, like I've noticed, there's actually some footprints around, which I think suffice to say, that could be a hint for something related to obtaining certain shinies in this whole entire game. But I do believe we do need to talk to someone in regards of the forms of trying to able to actually get into that particular shining objects to be, you know, trying to find and stuff like that. I apologize for my commentary getting a little bit slightly iffy at this point, because let's face it though, this game really bores me to death, especially concerning for the fact that, although, to be fair though, it's about the fact that despite the fact that we've already come across into one major glitch in this game so far, so suffice to say though, is about the fact that when it comes to likely later on in this whole entire game, oh goodness gracious me, it gets worse from here. So, and I believe that suffice to say that we actually did done every single constructive parts in regards to the forms of this particular hub world so far. Yeah, because after all, after grinding a lot of the forms of those scrap metal, as far as I'm aware, and it looks like about the fact that Cliff is no longer showed up in the forms of this particular camping site. So, I suppose we got able to meet him up during at some point in somewhere in during the forms of that other specific spot. So, anyways though, there's technically one final thing I want to point out right from the start though, is that it's kind of unfortunate for right now, in regards to the forms of Sonic Forces mobile game, as far as I'm aware, that Velvet Tales event that it was supposed to be coming, but unfortunately though, that particular event has been delayed due to unexpected circumstances. So, new dates will be announced as soon as possible, so this means we'll have to wait for much more longer time, especially concerning for the fact that I'm not exactly sure if Velvet Tales will be making its appearance for the sake of the forms of Sonic Dash, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. So, anyways, let's go and get on to the forms of this next Mark Speed section right here. So just to ensure for the fact that we can able to... What the heck is going on with the forms of this camera angle right away? Especially concerning for the fact that, well, it might be pretty impossible to able to dodge a lot of those things itself already. And also, suffice to say though, is about the fact that yes indeed, every once in a while, everyone else, specifically when it comes to Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, they all never shuts up. Especially whenever you do manage to collect specific rings, or trying to get onto the forms of the dash panels, and worst of all, use a bounce pad kind of quotes. And that's getting very old very fast, especially concerning for the fact that obviously though, while I do give the game some credit for when it comes to the voice casting department, but during the forms of the actual specific dialogue and during the forms of specific situations, though like I said before, it gets a little bit more repetitive now, in regards to the forms of every time whenever you manage to you know, trying to achieve something, ranging from, you know, collecting rings, as well as, you know, trying to able to actually activate the bounce pad, which, as a result, yeah, is pretty annoying, honestly. So, anyway, and like I said before, that's as far as we can able to actually talk about in terms of the forms of today's discussion already, especially concerning for the fact that still, I'm basically excited able to actually get my chance to playing through Sonic Cross Shadow Generations once that particular game is going to be releasing at some point in October. And suffice to say though, is about the fact that, well, I just seriously cannot wait until I'm able to actually play the game on the go on the Nintendo Switch. So I'm really hoping about the fact that the Switch version will run very well, unlike the forms of how it does it in Sonic Colors Ultimate, where basically though in Sonic Colors Ultimate's reception, that it just feels a bit all over the place when it comes to the forms of not only for its lengthy load times, but it's also about the fact that with some technical problems and also some very unexpected pop-up menus, specifically whenever you try to able to actually encounter with the rival races with Metal Sonic and all that stuff. So, but again, we shall see. So anyway, so it looks like we've met again with Cliff right there. Especially, it's been about, you know, quite a while, hasn't it, since we've last met up with Cliff, ever since in the beginning portion of the game. Well, at least after completing the forms of Lyric's tomb, but that's besides the point. So, it looks like now we can able to actually use this aircraft, and suffice to say, we can now move on to the second hub world of the game. So, because of that though, that the first half of the game is pretty much done, at least in terms of the forms of the actual story progression. So at least then again, we couldn't be bothered able to go for 100% completion, because obviously though there are certain side quests that are, well, let's just say they are pretty boring basically. So because of that, all it really shows is just about the fact that we have to do with a lot of combat. So yeah, I was thinking about that, because that makes the entire playthrough a lot more boring as it is. So anyway, so let's head over to the second hub world of the game, like I said before, and it looks like we're about to be ended up into Bygone Island. So, and it seems about the fact that the load times might take a bit longer at one point, which is especially noticeable because I believe this hub world is going to be a lot bigger than the first hub world for sure. So
This is your stop. Everyone off. You might want to jump now.
well, here we are, onto the second hub world in this game, which is known as Bygone Island, and suffice to say, is also looking rather barren, especially concerning for the fact that there's not much NPCs around here, and unless there is actually some things we can able to do around here, like for instance, we can able to claim this particular crown, but that's besides the point, and there are some other pickups we can able to pick up as well, if we decide able to actually do some a lot of exploration for Bygone Island. But apparently though, we must able to actually go into this next destination, which appears to be Crater Lake. So, and suffice to say for this point, Amy, we now on to, let's just say, the second half in terms of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. So because of that though, because like I said before, we now ended up in the second hub world in the game, and there's going to be a lot more problems that we might able to actually come across into for the sake of the forms of the majority of the second half of the game as far as this is concerned, which believe me while I'm saying this, I am not looking forward to it though. So suffice to say for this point guys, is that we get endings off this point right here. So join us next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. Is that we're about to make our way to Crater Lake, which we might able to actually get ourselves our next Chaos Crystal, and suffice to say we can also decide able to explore onto some aspects when it comes to Bygone Island. So yeah, that's as far as we can able to go for this point, so we'll see you guys until on Wednesday. Later fellas.